Now I would like to move a little bit because the call's kind of moved into the whole sexuality, gender identity thing. So I'd love to talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah.
So on October 6th of this last year, you released a video titled "My Most Important Video Yet." And you came out as trans to the whole internet, basically, which is terrifying and very brave. And I'm wondering what kind of prompted you to make that video and come out in that public kind of way.
So there were two motivators, okay? So the first motivator was, in the past, I had received a lot of comfort from people speaking openly and candidly about things that they were going through in that sort of format that I chose. It was just, for me, I think about, the people that I don't know that might watch my videos, like the people who are the lurkers, who are in situations where they are kind of alone, or they have to be careful about what they say online or how they portray themselves to the world. And whenever I was in those circumstances, the people who actually shared what they were going through were a big comfort to me. So that was one of the big motivators. And the other one, I knew that my family, for the most part, was not going to be okay with this. And so I decided that by making that video, that was me taking ownership and full control over this coming out experience. And it is kind of interesting that Drew called, because Drew was like one of the people that I sent that script to make sure that it came across the way that I was hoping that it would. And it really paid off for me, honestly. I had a wonderful reaction from the skeptic community, the atheist community at large. There are some, as V said, we have atheists of all stars and stripes, but the love and support that I received from the atheist community and skeptic community at large was fantastic. And it really made up for the negativity that came with that as well. The love was overpowering compared to the negativity that came. But yeah, those were my two motivators, and I'm really happy that I did it like that. I was so concerned that I would, in hindsight, be like, oh, well, maybe I should have gone a different way, and been all so full of self-doubt about it. But it really went exactly the way I wanted it to. And by making a video, you can really take control of the narrative. Because, if you think about having to go to each person that's in your life and have this conversation, and then they start talking to each other, and then things get kind of mixed up or lost in translation to each other. And it's just easier to make it like one statement, cover all the bases that you want to cover, and say, this is it.
You said you posted this video to your personal Facebook page as kind of that coming out to the people who knew you in your personal life. Was that scary? Like, how was that received?
Oh, yeah. The 2 weeks before I made the video, I was just wrecked with anxiety. Like, my depression, it was the worst. I was so emotionally, not good. But the benefit was that I spent so long planning this and meticulously, trying to make sure everything was perfect, that when the day came, I no longer felt any anxiety or anything. I was like, I'm ready. This is my thing. I'm going to do it. So when I posted it, I could not have had more of a willpower in that moment. And of course, my wife was so supportive and there for me. And she just made everything so much easier. But I received a lot of positive feedback, which was fantastic. But that was from people that I was friends with, former friends. The response from family was noticeably quiet. Because and that was to be expected, which that's one of the reasons why I again filmed the video and posted it on my personal Facebook, because I always try to be I don't want to be in everyone's face all the time with, the fedora wearing atheist, guys, you're stupid. So I actually had kept that stuff to a minimum on my old Facebook page. So that was me saying, okay, I've tried really hard to be as catering as possible to people's comfort zones. I'm not doing that any longer, because if I'm going to be openly trans for the first time, I'm also going to be openly everything else. And so that's why like whenever I made that video, it wasn't just me coming out as trans. It was also me letting everyone know, I also have a YouTube channel. I'm also going to be doing this. I'm moving to Austin. I want to be involved with this all the time. So it was sort of like just a PSA to everybody.
Yeah, it is nice to be able to kind of get it out of the way in a sense. And so I can definitely appreciate why you'd want to go about that and why that silence is actually a little bit better than like 15 separate arguments.
Yeah.
But I guess I just want to also kind of take a moment, since, we're here with a platform, and say that I still hate that we live in a society where you are expected to come out.
Yeah.
Because you don't check off the default boxes, and because you're different from the norm, all of a sudden it falls on you and that obligation of having that conversation over and over.
Right.
So, I only want to give you praise and excitement for like what you're putting out there. But I also want to just kind of turn the camera back on the world a little bit and be like, why does this need to be a thing? Why is this the expectation?
Right. Anything that is, because even if people are in straight relationships, but let's say they're polyamorous, anything that is outside of monogamous, cis, straight, you're expected to do a coming out. And it's just, I look forward to a society where it's not really like that anymore.
Especially when you check multiple boxes, but you find out at different times. And you're like, I have to come out again. I'm so sorry. Oh my goodness. Did you find that, looking back on it, did your coming out experience, not only to other people, but also to yourself and like that realization, do you feel like that was impacted by homeschool Christian culture at all? Like if you had been in another situation, do you think maybe you would have known sooner or felt more comfortable with it? Or how do you think that input?
Yeah, absolutely. Because for the longest time, let's see. So I realized that I liked girls, and then it was, that was like the hot topic at the time, right? Like gay rights was like still the big thing, like gay people gonna get married yet? So the trans stuff, this topic now, like this, which is fantastic because, they were kind of in the shadows for a really long time. Once that came up, that was whenever I started to realize, oh, wow, like people really do this. Like I knew that there were trans people, that trans people existed, but it was, I never understood hormone therapy. I didn't understand the actual like science that we have available to us to be able to help our dysphoria and be the person that we want to be. So yeah, I would have figured it out a lot sooner, and I would have had a lot less trouble accepting it. I've been trans my whole life, but I didn't start consciously letting myself accept because I was worried about the trouble, essentially.
Right.
It's a lot of trouble to be trans in America. I didn't consciously start letting myself have those discussions until a year ago, a year and a half ago. It was very, very recent that I finally was like, okay, I'm trans.
This is a thing, I suppose.
This is a thing.
Yeah. It's funny. I feel like people who, I could see the sign, looking back, I could see the signs of like, I don't think cis people do that.
Yeah.
Like, think about this with this much intensity. Or, like, consume the kind of material from the creators that I loved. Like, this feels like maybe I'm trying to tell myself something a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I always wonder what it would have been like to be a non-binary teen. Like, I think that's something that I'm really excited for this next generation to experience, because I think that would be really cool to know who you were that early on.
Yeah, that is awesome. I love seeing, because, on Twitter you see all types of different people in certain posts, and you'll see things that go viral, and it's really cool. It's really cool to see teenagers being able to openly wear labels and accept identities that some of us are only just now finally okay with, like, being open and honest about. It's fantastic. I love it.
It's really exciting.
Yeah.
It just makes me laugh to see so many older folks like push back and like, they're just going through a phase and they're, shifting through all these things. And, I have to say that's what your teenage years are.
Yeah.
You know, like whether you identify as punk or emo or a pirate or a ninja or whatever, like putting on those stupid labels and getting really passionate about it and then a week later changing it is kind of part of that identity development. And so even as we see more teenagers play around with and try on these roles, even if it doesn't necessarily stick. And I do want to be very sensitive to the fact that research shows pretty overwhelmingly that young children recognize their own gender identities and that trans kids should be believed and taken very seriously. But even still, as, you know, as 14, 15, 16-year-old has an opportunity to know words like non-binary or pansexual or these things that just weren't on the table for us.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. The labels don't make people who aren't those labels that thing. It's that you give the language to the people who are to understand themselves. And I guess my last question for this set of questions is just, I know for me, I'm constantly kind of seeing problematic assumptions and ideas about gender roles and like my role in the world keep popping up, you know, even though I'm constantly deconstructing it, it feels like things just keep happening. I'm like, oh, like that's an interesting thought. I know where that comes from and I know that it's wrong, but it's still there. I'm curious, are there any ideas about gender roles or anything you're working to deconstruct, or how are you finding
those holdovers?
Yeah, kind of making sure that you're deprogramming all of those different pieces.
100%. Absolutely. Growing up now, like when I look back on my childhood, I realized that, you know, a lot of the things that we would label as toxic masculinity, those got to me whenever I was younger. I didn't listen to what they told the girls. I listened to what they told the boys because I wanted to be a boy. So don't cry. Don't let anyone see you cry. Don't be a wimp. Don't be weak. Those were all the messages that I tried to exemplify. So I have a lot of holdovers from that, and it's definitely something that I'm very aware of, and I work hard because, like you said, you can deconstruct something, and then it's almost like you notice something new. Like as soon as you finish the old one, and you're like, okay, like I'm done with that. Like you realize there's this next thing that you want to work on. So yeah, it's very interesting, and you know, sort of one thing I've noticed too is that there will be things like I'll do something and that'll make me feel dysphoric, right? And then I'll be like, well, why do I feel dysphoric about that? Whenever I sit there and really think about it, I only feel dysphoric about it because I'm adhering to very strict gender roles, right? So whenever I start to, I'm like, okay, but let's think about how gender actually is, and let's think about the ways that we express ourselves. It's not dichotomous, right? And so then it actually helps alleviate some of my dysphoria because I don't have to look this specific way or sound this specific way to be like male, right? So it is a big benefit. Whenever you realize that some of your dysphoria is only because you're, unconsciously enforcing gender stereotypes onto yourself, it can relieve some of it. Obviously, not all of it's going to go, but it can help. It can be a big relief.
That's a very interesting take. That makes a lot of sense, actually.
Yeah, I mean, just dysphoria as a concept is going to be significantly reduced when you don't have rigid gender rules.
Right.
So, yeah, that makes total sense. And the activity that you're doing, I mean, actively deconstructing these things is specific to you and your experience, but I mean, it's a skill set that we all need to be really working on growing. I mean, just like a week ago, you know, my girlfriend and I have like something of a division of labor, and it's not necessarily down gender lines. It's more just that I don't mind cleaning toilets and I hate folding laundry, and so that's just sort of how it worked out. But, you know, she was gone and there was laundry that needed to be done. I'm grown-ass man, I can do laundry. And I'm doing our laundry, which is all in like one massive pile, and I realized that like just sort of putting her clothes in a pile for her to fold herself and doing only mine is, of course, a very shitty thing to do. But I was like, I don't understand where any of her things go. I don't even, frankly, know how to hang up or fold some of these garments that make no, like, architectural sense to me. And the geometry is off. So it put me in this place of really wanting to just be like, well, I can't do this, and just, walk away from it. And it was honestly, I had to really swallow my pride. And I don't say that in a proud way. I'm not bragging about how humble I am so much as to say, like, here I am in 2020 being the kind of dickhead who's like, I just couldn't figure it out. Like, your dress is in a pile on the floor. Is that where you wanted it? Like, and so, yeah, humbling myself and like asking her, where does this go, was honestly really embarrassing. Like, I am still like kind of awkward about it because I just picture, my dad would have never done that in a million years. And even though I don't aspire to be like him, you carry these things with you, whether you realize it or not, and they pop up at the weirdest of moments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. The funniest thing for me is I remember being on the bus one day, and these two old women were talking about their husbands, and they were both like, yeah, when I was in the hospital for some reason, and he called me to ask how to make a can of tomato soup. And they were just like, oh, man. And I was like, that's horrible.
It really is.
Like, it's such a manly quality to not be able to feed yourself. Like, that doesn't seem right.
No.
That doesn't seem okay. But yeah, I take your point completely that looking at gender roles under a microscope and really realizing that it's not an either-or situation a lot of the time can really help.
Yeah.
That's a really good point.